of things. First, I'll ask the status of House Bill 2342 and House Bill 2118. Are those now in conference committee? Not yet.
Madam Chair, the House did a motion to non-concur on both of those. The Senate has not yet acceded, so we can assume that you will, but best not to take action on those. Yep.
True. Okay, so we're getting there. And then, so that leaves us with Senate Bill 9. There was an offer from the Senate that had 4 components to it. One was have the governor sign off on some exceptions to some additional land acquisition, and one was to change the language regarding the Attorney General's office from policy and procedures to strike that language because there's rules and regulation authority in the bill for the Attorney General office. And the third was to was it to change the entity to principal or change the Department of Administration? To change the definition of foreign entity regarding de minimis ownership. Was that the? Okay, I don't have those papers in front of me. And so I think I said those were 2 amendments, and then the other 2 were on the drone part where we were going to add in cameras in addition to drones with a definition of cameras, and on the date of additional component parts for drones and cameras would be moved from, and or acquisition of those would be moved from July 1, 2020, would be moved to December 31 of 2025 because the House had already rejected the offer of moving it to July 1st of 2026. So if I have that correct, that kind of brings us current, I think. So, and we had last made a counter proposal on, we were talking just about the date with the December 31st of 2025 from July 1 of 2025. So is it, I don't know if you guys want to respond with the rest of the components and what your position is on those. I think that would be the next step.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had thought that we had already declined the 12/31 date, but that's fine. We'll decline that at this point. We feel that there are plenty of exceptions in the bill, and the threat is imminent and real, and so we don't want to change the date. We do, however, we will agree with the governor's sign-off, the AG policy and procedure strike, and the definition of foreign entity. But as far as the date, the House cannot stomach that. And the cameras, although we feel are a good idea, we think that at this point is a bridge too far. We don't know what the ramifications could be, and so we'll decline that. And I know that there's a bill in the works for an infrastructure next year, and the majority leader said that he would agree to work with you on figuring out the camera part at that time.
All right, thank you for that. Let us confer for a moment with and consider the House's position on those. Thank you. Just to be clear, is this where we are on the definition that it's the proposed amendment, Senator Titus, that the amendment's on page 2, and we're striking foreign entity and stating and such company is not domiciled outside of the United States. Is that the offer that you've offered to accept? Okay, thank you. All right, thank you for standing at ease for a few moments. And I think Senator Corson wanted to ask a few things before we let you know what we're going to do. Senator Corson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Chair, I know that you guys have heard this in a much more thorough and detailed way than we did on the Senate side. So I wanted to see if there had been any concern raised about the 100-mile radius. That is, in effect, other than a small portion of Southwest Kansas, essentially a statewide ban. And I just didn't know if anybody had mentioned that during hearings, if that was something the committee had worked through, and how firm that position was on the 100-mile radius, and what considerations had gone into that.
Representative Turk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, absolutely. In fact, we took recommendations from multiple officials, from the Fusion Center to the federal level. There are a range of recommendations from as far as 250 miles to as low as 180 miles, and we settled on 100 miles. I would meet in the middle selection, but there was extensive discussion about it, and honestly, we've received some critique that it's too light. So I think it's a great place to start for this, and this is truly a compromise bill on a whole host of different levels, but I think that would be in the big one.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then is there any concern given to any impact this would have on existing, or potential deal flow, or bringing businesses in, and how that would potentially impact anything that was in the pipeline? I don't know of anything specifically, but I didn't know if that was something that was raised in your committee, if you'd heard any of those concerns.
Chair Tarwater.
Thank you. So there were, the only concern that was there was that the cost of the American-made drones and drone parts might be more expensive. But there was quite a bit of discussion that there are drone companies out there that are wanting to actually move to the state of Kansas and start building drones here. And that is in a different bill that we've been negotiating on in our Commerce, House Commerce Committee for the aviation industry that would include drones. We didn't quite get that over the finish line this year, but we'll have a good incentive program for them to come here and build drones. So it should be a good thing for the state of Kansas. Thanks.
And then I just had one more, if I may, Madam Chair. There was, you would maybe know the details of the bill better than I would, but access to incentive programs. If a company is here lawfully and some of them may be currently getting an incentive program or partaking in an incentive program, would that be able to continue? Again, if a company is otherwise complying with everything that we've set out, do you know if they would be able to continue getting incentives? I just don't know the answer to that, to be honest.
Is that a question the reviser can answer?
Give me just 1 second to look at something here. And Madam Chair, just to clarify, what you're curious about is if that is just forward-looking as well, that provision?
Yeah, so for example, if a company is currently operating here, they may be partaking in an incentive program of one or another sort. Does the bill provide that as long as they are, meeting all the requirements we've asked of them, that would be able to continue?
Madam Chair, it looks a little unclear to me. So the economic incentive language is in new section 5 of the bill. It's a standalone section, and all the section says is no foreign principal shall receive any direct benefit related to any economic development program, regardless of the form of such benefit. it doesn't have like a perspective, on and after this date, or it's not tied. So I think it would be a pretty strict prohibition. And then, of course, I don't know if you need me to refresh you on the definition of economic incentive program, but it includes, anything from the Secretary of Commerce, the tax credits, property tax exemptions, job creation program fund programs, and then it says any other economic development incentive program. So it's pretty broad.
Okay, well, those were all helpful answers to my questions and much appreciated.
Thank you. Yes, Senator Titus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to follow up with the revisor on that. So if it's back to our work on de minimis, if they're an indirect owner in a company that counts as de minimis, would that company be ineligible from receiving? Because it says pretty directly, no foreign principal. How would that apply to new Section 5?
So the foreign principal language would still be, would still apply. So that definition is what would be used. So it wouldn't be the broad, you guys were talking about the definition of foreign entity, which is any company that's domiciled outside the United States. This is the more, has, but any of them would be exempt from being able to participate in those programs.
All right, I have a question. We've been talking about the date on the drones issue, and we had talked about that there are some built-ins there to make sure that law enforcement could have some way to make sure that they get the parts that they need while we're still working on national security. Is that something the revisor can point out again, or did you have something in mind, Chair, that you could point out just to be rest assured for our law enforcement community? Is that something the revisor can share about getting replacement components or acquiring new?
Sure, Madam Chair. So if you look at Section 12, starting on page 10 at line 42, any acquisition that is otherwise prohibited by subsection A may be completed by a governmental agency if, and so they'd have to meet the test, there's no other reasonable means to acquire such critical components or of addressing the needs of the governmental agency. The agreement for that acquisition is approved by the Secretary of Administration after consulting the Adjutant General, and failure to acquire that critical component would pose a greater risk to the safety and security of the state than the acquisition. So you'd have to meet all three of those to be able to get an exemption from that.
And the prohibition doesn't apply to any contract or agreement that's entered into before July 1, 2025. That's
correct, yeah.
in subsection D on page 11.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, Senator Titus.
Just to make sure we're clear on intent here. So the idea is if you're a sheriff's office that failed to put a 5-year contract in place, and they have their drone stops working, and they come and apply for are they going to be forced to buy a new American drone? What's the case look like in your guys' mind as you put the intent? What's just their situation like if it's a part they need but they don't have the 5-year contract, or they didn't put anything in place? Are they going to have to buy a new American drone? Assuming one's available, is that how you foresee it playing out, or what's your intent?
Chair Tarwater.
So are you talking about if a current drone fails and they don't have a part to repair it, then the drone can't be used unless they can find a part that's not made, or that's made for that drone. It's not made by China. However, I would imagine that they're going to be very aware of this bill, and they're going to all have contracts of some sort by the time that July 1st comes around. If not, then they're not they're not doing their due diligence. But I can tell you that most of these law enforcement entities are already beginning the process. I mean, the Highway Patrol, Kansas Highway Patrol already has done away with all DJI drones, and they're all American-made at this point. Thanks.
Well, thank you for the further clarification from the revisor and from the intent regarding the date. And finally, then, with the inclusion of, well, with the amendment to add cameras in and the discussion here in committee that it looks like it's going to be a bill that would be taken up next session to look at cameras and infrastructure and things of that nature to make sure that that'll be looked at next session and an opportunity to do a deep dive on that issue for both chambers, is what I'm hearing on that. So maybe that's a more appropriate time to discuss the cameras issue, when we can do that in a bill that would look specifically at what our infrastructure our surveillance infrastructure looks like. So with that, then, I think that the Senate is in a position to accept that the change regarding, did you want to, the three changes, I don't want to get these wrong, yeah, from the revisor, the three offered regarding the non-drone issues, and then the two on the cameras and the date, it looks like we're not going to be able to reach agreement on those two. So if you want to state that for the record clearly, thank you.
I'll state the agreement as I understand it. So the first change would be on page 2, changing foreign entity to the company is not, is domiciled somewhere outside the United States, the Titus Amendment from this morning, and then removing the definition of foreign entity. The second change would be on page 4, adding the, clarifying the prospective language, and also adding the governor approval process for acquiring more land. All those subsection changes after that would be included, because that is part of that change there. The change on page 6 with the Attorney General clarifying language on the rules and regulations, removing the references to policies and procedures. And then that, I think, is the entire agreement, because you're keeping the Department of Administration on page 11, so.
That's the Senate's understanding, yes. Chair Tarwater? Okay, and that's the House's understanding as well. So with that, then we'd ask that the conference committee report be prepared. And since we don't yet have other things in conference yet, it's on 2342 or 2118. Chair Tarwater.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I believe that since we have non-concurred on those two bills, and the intent is for the Senate to accede to that, we could have discussions on those two. We just can't come to an agreement until later this afternoon after you accede to the conference committee. And if you have the time, we can start that process. Or if you don't, we can wait until we have about a 2:30 with Commerce to talk about 3 or 4 bills, and then after that we can meet.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we can discuss real briefly 2342 and 2118. We do have caucus at 1:30, so if we can keep it real brief.
Okay, we need to switch members here with a tag out. Yeah. Okay, so we'll go ahead and start conferencing on HB 2342, and that is the background checks. If you want to get a quick, do you want to get a description or do you want to wait on that?
We can wait on that.
What is your intent?
Our intent is there's a similar bill regarding background checks in conference with House Judiciary and Senate Judiciary. It is Senate Bill 30. It is the intent of the Senate for the Senate's position to be to adopt the changes made to Senate Bill 30 by the House and then put all of that into House Bill 2342. And that would help kind of reconcile what those two bills do separately, but if we put them together, that takes care of any conflicts therein.
Okay, so to be clear, you want to take Senate Bill 30 as amended in House Judiciary, and insert those contents into 2342.
Yes, take the contents of Senate Bill 30 as amended by House Judiciary Committee and put those contents in 2342. Yes, Madam Reviser.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I might just want to clarify, the change that the Senate made to House Bill 2342 was an effective date change, so you should maybe discuss what you want to do with that change.
That was a change the House made. Oh. We can go back to the original House position.
I have a question. Reviser, can you tell me what the effective date is on 2118 as well? Or, I'm sorry, 2342?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, the current effective date on House Bill 2342 is Kansas Register. That's the change that was made in the Senate to get the bill to conference. So that's the only difference between your positions right now.
And that's the same as what SB 30 is currently?
Mr. Chairman, I believe Senate Bill 30 is statute book. Let me double check real quick.
And your intent would be to make them both Kansas Register?
Right, to have them effective as soon as possible.
All right, so I have had a brief discussion with the Judiciary Chair, and I think that she's amicable to that. I have not had a time to confer with my committee, and so I think I know your intent, and we can most likely be able to accept this later this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may, I wanted to mention that I have had conversations with House Judiciary Chair, and my understanding was she was agreeable to this proposal.
We just can't make an agreement now until you accede.
Sure, got it. And then on 2118, we would, I guess, do we need to, right, to get it back to the register? 2118.
Madam Chair, that actually wasn't changed in 2118. In 2118, you made a substantive change about the Consumer Protection Act deeming those transactions to be consumer protection transactions. So you're essentially deeming the business the supplier and then the person who's the victim as the consumer.
I recall, and those are important substantive changes that we would need to keep in place, would be the Senate position.
Did you? So we're, for the record, we're on 2118 now. We're done with 2342. So 2118. What is your? Do you have any other intent with that other than the changes you made?
That would be the intent with Senate Bill 20, or House Bill 2118.
Okay, again, we can't come to any kind of agreement, but I think I have a good idea what you're looking for there.
Great.
Is there a time that works for you this afternoon? We have at 2:30 approximately, after we're done at 2, with Senate Commerce just across the street here, across the hall, and then, so we could come.
I think House and Senate Judiciary Conference Committees are planning to meet at 3, so maybe we can try to get back together at 3:30.
All right, since you have this room booked for the day, can we do it here?
Well, I'd prefer upstairs, but this room will be fine.
We can have Barbara call and get a room, I think, probably.
Right. We'll figure it out. Yeah, as
3:30.
that's the aim, yes, so, all
All right, sounds good. Thanks.
right, thank you.
We're adjourned.